Hey everyone, this is Eric Freeman, and this is the companion video for Chapter 8 of Head First JavaScript Programming. And we have a doozy of a chapter for you this time around. This chapter is all about building an app. So we've spent a lot of time in this book learning the basics of JavaScript. We spent a little bit of time learning how to interface JavaScript with HTML and CSS. And we're assuming a bit that you've got some CSS and HTML knowledge coming into this book. And as you know, to build a real web application, we've really got to put these three components together. And you've heard us say it over and over, but HTML really gives you kind of the structure of the page or of the app, the visual app. The CSS gives us our styling and our visual look. And the JavaScript gives us our behavior. And so in this chapter, we're going to bring that all together in a big way. And to do that, we're going to return to an old topic, which is our old Battleship game. Now, admittedly, we wrote a bit of a toy Battleship game in Chapter 2. It had one row and one ship. And so it got us really started on how to take a problem and drop it into an algorithm and then build some code from that. This time around, though, we're going to do the real deal. And actually, we're going to break here for a second, and Elizabeth is going to take us through playing the game.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, I have got the Battleship game up in my webpage, and I'm ready to play. So let's take a quick look at the game before I get started. Notice that we've got a Battleship game board in the middle of the page with the rows labeled A through G and the columns labeled 0 through 6. And down here at the bottom, we've got a form input where I can enter my guesses and a fire button to actually send them off. So I'm basically ready to play, so I'll start making some guesses. So I'm going to start with A0 and see what happens, and I get a miss. So notice that the miss graphic shows up at position A0, and up in the corner you can see I've got a tiny little message saying you missed. So I'll enter another guess. I'm going to try B1. Got another miss. How about B2? All right, B is not working for me, so I'm going to try C0. Try C3. I am missing ships here. Let's try D2. D1. Oh, I've got a ship. Okay, so now you can see I've got a ship at D1, so we see a ship graphic. And up in the top left-hand corner, we see a hit message. So I'm going to try C1. So let's try E1. And F1. So I have sunk a ship, and you can see up in the left-hand corner it says, "You sank my battleship." So I can keep playing. I'm going to try F2, F3, E3. Ooh, I got another ship. So let's try E4 and E5. So it must be E2. There we go. And I've now sank 2 battleships. So there's only one ship left. I wonder where it is. Let's try B6, C5, D6. How about G6, F5. Oh my goodness, where is the ship? G2, A3. There we go. Got it. So let's try A4 and A5. Must be A2. And I have sank all 3 battleships, and it took me 29 guesses. So I didn't do particularly well on the game, but at least I got all of the ships. So now that you've had a look at how the game is played, I'll hand it back over to Eric, and he can tell you about how you're going to build this game in Chapter 8.
All right, so as you can see, this is no toy. It's actually a real game that works very well in the browser. So what we're going to do in this chapter is going to depart a little bit from the other chapters in this book. Actually, every chapter in this book has departed from the other chapters in this book because they're all just a bit different. But this chapter is really a hardcore coding chapter, and we're going to jump in, and it's going to take us about 60 pages or so to really go through this app and to build it from scratch. To do that, we're going to start really with a set of graphical assets. So we've got the kind of green phosphorus radar look of the game itself. We've got a graphic for the ship and a graphic for if you miss, if you're taking a shot at the ships. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that, place that in our page, of course, in some HTML, and then we're going to add some more HTML that's really going to become the structure or the grid that the game is being played in. Now, you're not going to see that structure. It's going to be sitting right on top of that image, and the image is actually going to provide the backdrop for the game itself. Now, once we have that in place, then we're going to start digging in and writing a little bit of code. In that code, we're actually going to design in a fairly object-oriented way, actually in a really object-oriented way. And what we're going to do is we're going to break the problem down into 3 different pieces. Those pieces are known as the model, the view, and the controller. And we're going to use those to essentially create our game. Now, very quickly, the model is the thing that's really going to model your game. In other words, it's going to keep track of where the ships are in the game, how many hits you've had on those ships, and it's really going to keep the state of the game itself. The view is very simple. All the view does is display things for you. So the view knows how to put a ship on the screen. The view knows how to display a little message, and the view knows a little bit about how to get your input. The controller actually is where it all comes together. The controller glues all those pieces together and kind of grabs the input from the player, gets it over to the model, and then things just happen. The model changes the state of the game and passes it over to view to output to you. As I said in this chapter, there's a lot of hardcore coding. Now, about 95% of this coding is all stuff you have seen before. There's going to be a couple places here and there where we're going to go out to a little bit of a fringe territory where we're going to introduce, say, a method that you haven't seen before, like a method on an array, for instance. And we'll just spend a little bit of time, a little bit of a page saying, hey, here's what this method does. You haven't used it before, but it shouldn't be a big deal to you at this point. You know it's a method, you know what object it's on, and we'll tell you what it does and what it accepts as input and what its output is. And you should be good from there. Now, the very last piece of this chapter, after we implement the model, view, and controller, which gives us essentially the game and the game logic, is we do have this little exercise where we need to randomly place ships in the game, because when we start out, we're going to hard code those ships just so we know where they are. It's easy to test the game. But then we need to come back and we need to write code that every time you play it puts those ships at a different location. It's not a big, complicated piece of code, but it is kind of an intricate piece of code. And so we'll step through that. When we do that, we're going to start to, and you're going to see this throughout the rest of the book, we're going to start to assume that you've got a little bit of knowledge about JavaScript at this point, that you actually can read some code and understand it. And so we are going to fully explain it, but you're going to see our pace quicken just a little bit when we go through that code. And I think by this point, you're going to be totally fine with that. That actually about wraps it up for this chapter. So good luck. Put your head down and get through it. There's a lot of code here to absorb. Take a couple passes if you need to do it. Get a night's sleep in between if you need to get through to do it. But everything is laid out in detail for the most part in this chapter. So if you start it, you've got a good helping hand to get you through it. And this is just a great time, given your knowledge, to build that first web application and see all these pieces come together, but also to write a piece of code that is actually fairly complete. So good luck, and we will see you in chapter 9.